Okay. Let's see. If it's just the 7 of you, I won't even. Well, the 7 of you have been consistently doing whatever you need to do to keep learning, and TJ as well, I guess. So, I wouldn't even want to give it an exam if it's just but it seems as though I give exams to make sure that those who are not interested, I don't know how much value there is for an exam sometimes, but I think you can use it to check for yourself how far you've come. And of course, the college requires me to give a grade, so I will grade it. But I have to say that those of you who are currently here, I'm perfectly happy with the amount of commitment you've shown. So try to not grade very strictly. But anyways, so if you have questions, you have to ask me. The first thing is my Brown M&M check is to make sure that all your tables are here. That's one check. So are all of you there? Is anyone having trouble with the last time it was Liv, you had some problems with your tables, have you?
I got it.
Okay. Well, that's one. So let's see. Okay. Gosh. Anyway, so that's one piece. The other is your at the end of last class. Chris, is it recording or can you see the screen? Okay. Okay, the second piece is your tests to see if the tests are running. One thing is you can see there are a set of tests that show up which we didn't create. I told you that if you want to, you can keep it, but it actually sort of there are nothing really created there. Okay, so if you don't want it to show up, the simplest thing will be to just remove this annotation on top which says test method. For the 3, if you go into the controller test and remove the 3. The reason I'm keeping it is if at some point you want to refer to see how you can test off of the controller itself. Right now we are not testing off of the controller. Testing of the controller, my own experience has been that it's not as robust or reliable. Testing off of, where do we test? We are not, when I say we are not testing off the controller, where are our tests run off of? The model classes, yeah. So that's the more reliable place to. So once you remove that, remove or comment out the test method attribute, then it should be. It shouldn't show up. Okay, so as a test, so it basically takes out the clutter if you don't want some tests to show up. Okay, so the next step to see if you are the test to see if you are where we were in the class. You need to have these 3 tests running. How many of you have all the tests? Anyone? No? What do you mean? If you know why it's wrong, you should be able to fix it. Are all 3 tests failing? Yeah. Okay. Then if all 3, okay. If let's say somebody, anyone, what's the first place almost always you run into problems. So you have to know why it's happening, and only then can you know how to fix it. So what's the most likely reason if all three are failing? What are the likely reasons? Okay, that's one, database connection. For test failing, where will you look for a database connection? In which one? Okay, web config. Where does this web config go? Yeah, it goes to the connection string, but the web config is associated with the MVC, the web app. So if the test is failing, that's not where you want to look. The connection string for the test project is not here. Yeah, what's it called? Yeah, go into app config, and that's where, if your tests are failing, this is where you want to look for the connection. That's the first thing, as Megan pointed out. What's the second piece? So that's one. So let's say the connection string is fine. Where do you look after that? What other factor? These are probably the two major reasons. Yeah, Krista?
I was just assuming if my actual number of colleges are what I expected to be, the amount of data that I entered is the amount that I'm telling my test stuff I have.
Yeah, that's one. So you're saying the number could be, if all the tests are having something similar, some similar type of data, I would go with you. Maybe if it's all relying on that same type of data. Even before that, this one is if the data is incorrect, what is the type of error you'll get? Yeah.
Expected was.
Okay. Expected to, it's going to fail on this, but if your connection string is failing, or there's another thing that could fail. The other thing is whenever we set up this test, the test project, we had to do something else, and that was, yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing is you cannot be afraid to mess things up. Like the issue is you have to be. If it messes up, you have to again. One thing is you have to. Very few of us do it systematically, but you have to make notes. What did you do, and what do you have to undo or retrace your path? You have to go to Tools, and on the NuGet Package Manager, there is this graphical interface for package solutions, and it opens up a UI as opposed to the console window, and you have to make sure that your entity framework is associated with both the projects, the test project as well as your this. When does the web app get the entity framework associated with it? There are two projects here. When did this get associated with the entity framework? When you created it. So this, you don't have to worry about adding. It's only the test project that you have to go in and add. If you don't, then it won't go to the database. This is how the object-oriented world speaks to the database world. Without this entity framework, there's no communication. Okay, so those are the main reasons your connection, your tests could fail. And beyond that, I don't know. I'll have. But if you retrace the steps, I think it should. Chris, are your tests passing?
Yeah.
Okay. So everyone else, the tests are passing? Yeah.
When I do my the M word. Migration, thank you. When I went to migration, I still get the error saying that I can't find my my until about MVCS, but then like it still works. I had that problem before, and like everything seems to be running correctly. I just don't want to get through the exam and have it not run correctly.
So it's saying that it doesn't find the entity framework?
Yeah, I can update my exam.
Okay. Well, if it's working for now, I'll continue on and then come back to it.
Okay.
Once you have that, another hour or so. So I just want to go over the thoughts that I want you to understand, because I will ask a question on this on the exam, which connects the. So it's essentially this entire cycle. Like you have to know, starting from model, the test, then go to the controller. So let's go to the simple controller. After the exam next Thursday, I'll show you other ways of creating controllers. But for the exam, I want you to be able to create these controllers from scratch instead of trying to generate it using a template or a scaffolding. Okay, so this is the end of class. I do this just to make sure that I have the right number of closing curly braces so that I don't get lost. That's one of the causes of errors. Okay, so what I want to do is this method that I have for, I want to be able to find all colleges currently in a conference. And so for that, I'm going to create a controller. Let's see, what's the controller I want here? Okay, I'm going to create two. This is just displaying. So if I ran, so this gets, where is my first controller method? So display all conferences. This is just going and displaying. Now, what I want to do in this case is that the method that we created, find all colleges currently in a conference. We are taking a conference ID, using it to find the names of all the colleges and also the date they joined the conference. Now, where do you get this conference ID from? The user is going to provide it, but you don't want the user to be typing in an ID they probably don't know. So what's the best way of getting this value from the user? Yeah. Well, conference name, if you have them type it in, they might type in like what you did. You spelled out something like the ACC. They could put it all together. They could spell it out as the Atlantic Coast Conference. They could leave spaces. Yeah. Yeah, so we leave the drop down. So that's the simple action. So that's what you're going to do first. Create pretty much something very similar. So a method in the controller. We'll put all our methods in the same controller. It's going to be a simple method, pretty much like this, except instead of display all conferences, I'm going to say some public. It can be action result or it can be called view result. You can, so I'll just say view result because you're going to send back a view. An action could be, it's more generic, like you could redirect the user to another view and so on. So, well, a view result returns a view. I'm going to, let's see, well, this is what's meaningful. We are going to display a drop-down list. So display, I'll just call it something like display conferences and drop-down. Okay, so this is going to send a view result to be used to display conferences in a drop-down list. So this list that we are going to send is going to come from, where is that database? Okay, so this is going to come from essentially the from our model. So we'll say, let's see if this will work. So if we are going to send it through a view bag, and we'll call this view bag, like we are going to get conference IDs, and I'll explain why I'm calling this variable for the view bag conference ID. And we have to provide a selection list. So I'll call this select list. I need to see if this works directly from the model or whether we have to go to the database. But let's say select list. Okay, I have to give it a collection. Okay, so just as we did in the previous case, I'm just going to get this data from the model. So I'm just going to copy this one statement in here. Okay, and so when I create this selection list, I'm going to specify that this list of items is coming from this all conferences list that I have. So all conferences, and then I have to specify two other parameters. One is what is the one parameter is going to be, let's see if it shows this here. Okay, it says data value field, and the second is the data text field. Okay. So the data value field, it's sort of self-explanatory. The text field is what the user is going to see. The value field is what? The ID that gets sent back. So that's the one we want. Okay, so we have to give it as strings. The ID, the value field is conference ID, and what did we call the, let's see, the second column, conference name. Okay. Okay, so we are going to send this over in a view bag. And then we are going to, in the previous case we said we are going to return a view that said, which sent this data in it. But since we are sending this through a view bag, and the reason we are using a view bag is for the drop-down list. Use a view bag for populating a drop-down list. In the previous case, what were we populating? Display all conferences. What did we do in this case? That's the reason I didn't just use this method. I wanted to contrast this. What did we do in the previous case? Yeah, we just displayed it in a table. So if you go to display all conferences, it just displays everything in a table. That's pretty much what it does. So here we want to create a drop-down list, so we're sending it through a view bag. And so our view, it can be something as simple as we just say return view. We can just leave it at that. You don't need to give a view name, but let's name that here. Okay. So if I don't give a view name and I say I'm returning a view, what is the requirement for this to work? In the previous case, I just sent the data to the view. I didn't give a view name. One of the options you'll see in the constructor for a view is to actually give a view name. Okay, so you can. So when do you think we need to give a view name? Yeah. Well, if you're going to call it later, it's even more simple than that. If you want to call it, you might. If you want to specifically want to call a view, you might want to give a view name, especially if you want to send. Let's say you're doing error checking, and so you might have a separate view for if there is an error, you might send them there. But here, it's simpler because we're only having one single view for this controller method. Yeah.
Is it kind of for yourself so you know what the view is doing?
That's also there, but again, anyone else? Yeah, Ashley? Well, what is the convention? The MVC goes to, first it's going to go to a directory with the same name as the controller, right? So it's going to go to conference simple. What's the other thing that tells MVC that it has to use this particular view? It's the name of the method, right? So that's the convention. So if you use the same view for multiple methods, then you can't name the view by different names. So which means that the MVC convention is you can avoid giving a name to the view that you are returning if it's the same name as the controller method. If this is different, then you have to specify it here. Okay, so if you use different names, just keep in mind that you will have to specify it in the view. Okay, so I'm going to add it. I just highlighted the entire method name, and I'm just going to send it as an empty view. That's the one I'm going to create for the exam as well. As I said, next Thursday we'll start exploring. From next Thursday we'll be spending much more time, most of the time, on your project, and we'll add in some other discussions, but I just want to make sure you can connect it to your project. Okay, so we have this view, and we have to start creating this display conferences. Okay, I'll just keep it as this. Now, what I need to do is to create this this form itself, and one of the easier ways to set this up is the using statement. So using open close, but within using we want to set up whatever, starting with the HTML.begin form. Okay. So for this we have three parameters that we usually provide. The first one is, let's see if there is any IntelliSense here. So, does it provide any of you some IntelliSense? Okay, right here.
If you do comment,
When
if you just type a comment in there.
in there?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, so the action name followed by the controller name. So first, action name, it means what? Which is our action here? This is where we want it to go, right? The process. Do we have the action as yet? And the answer is, we don't quite have it, because we need another method here, public, just say view result, and what do I call this? This is the one that returns. I'll just call it by whatever name, like, let's call it find, what was it, find colleges in selected conference. Okay, and then I have to set up something here. What am I expecting as a parameter here? What is it always, Megan? Anyone else? Yeah, Logan?
Conference ID.
Okay, the conference ID. What data type is it? Okay, and so this is going to be, and I have, so the requirement is you have to call, when we are using the ViewBank, we have to call it by this name, conference ID. So over here, when we are receiving it back from the view, I end up calling it by the same name with the case sensitiveness. It has to sort of conform, otherwise you may not receive the value here. Okay, and I'll just say return view, some view, if I want to return view. Let's say I want to name this something else. I'll say, instead of saying find colleges, I'll say colleges in selected conference. So that's going to be the name of that view. Okay, the reason I came back into the controller, let me go back to this view. Why did I go back into the controller? What is it asking for as the first parameter? Yeah. It's asking for the action, and what's the action? Find, I just called it find colleges. Whatever you call this method, find colleges in selected conference. That's going to be my first parameter. It's a string, so I have to put it within quotes. Okay, so that's my first parameter. What's the second? It's a controller name. So what's the controller name? Conference simple. Remember not to include controller. Controller is just a suffix. So just the name of the class is just controller. Conference simple. Okay, and then finally you could include whether it's a HTTP post or get, so I think it's called method, is it? Form method, let's see. Form method dot, it's a post method, because it's sending it to the server for it to do its, send the data from the user. Okay, so that's your header. Within the, I guess this, we can, I think it's fine to set this header outside. I don't know, maybe we have to move that in, we'll see what happens. But the main thing we want to include here, we'll discuss a little bit of CSS cascading style sheets, and sometime maybe next week or the week after. But basically we put a div tag here And whenever you have a label and a UI, some object through which you're getting data from the user, you can combine it into one sort of a concatenated group. And there's this cascading style sheet clause that's built in called a form group. So this basically takes the styling for a group and provides it. So what we are going to do is combine a label, so HTML dot label. So we are just going to say choose, well, what do we want to do? Choose a conference. Choose a conference from whatever the drop down is. Okay. So I think this should be fine. We could add other attributes, but I think I'll just go with this for formatting. Let's see if this works. And then I'll use HTML dot drop down list. And here I have to specify the name of the drop down list. Whatever my name for this drop-down list is. So I'm going to call this by the same name as whatever my my view bag is for sending the data over. What did I call that? My view bag variable is conference ID, so I'm going to use that. Okay, so I'll try that, conference ID, and I'm trying to be very minimal here. So whenever you're working on a project, the exam, after you add a few things, just see if this is working or not. So at this point, I want to check to see if this is working for me. So I'm going to just start this to make sure that I do have a drop-down list. If I don't get a drop-down list, I have to figure out if I need to make any changes. Okay, so this is display. What should I change here? Instead of display all conferences, it should be what? Okay, somebody else, Chris?
Display conferences in drop-down.
Okay, we called it display conferences in drop-down list. Okay. So I'll use that as my method name. If I do it, okay. So I have this. Okay, so what as I said, do it in small increments so you know that you have. So if you do everything and then you try to then run it, you might not. So okay, how many of you are having this? Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. So for this to work, the main things to keep in mind, as I said, the first is you have to have a view bag, and this view bag has to provide a select list with. And in the select list, what do you need to provide? Obviously, you need to provide the list of values, and the list of values should be accompanied by two other things. And what are these two things? One is, the first one is actually what? Yeah. Well, this is the value that gets sent, and this is what gets displayed. Okay, so these are the three things to keep in mind. Okay, so in case so the first is the data set or list, and you can get this from wherever database, but for us, we are getting it through the model. The second one is the value, which is usually the ID, and the third one is the text, which is for display. Okay, So once we have this working, the next step is, well, we need to send it back. The drop down by itself is not. So we are going to create another, again, I'm trying to keep it very minimal. I don't want to add stuff that won't be needed. So, just, you can create separate groups if you're having multiple inputs being provided by the user. Here, you can either put a label or you can just say, have them submit, and I think there are multiple ways to have them submit. I don't know if there's a submit button or button, radio button. There's no regular button. Okay. So if there is no button here, I need to use plain HTML. Whenever you have this @ symbol, this is not plain HTML. What is this? Yes. It's C#, so it's C# enhancement of the basic HTML. So it's a C# class we are dealing with. But you go to some plain HTML, so input type and specify it as I want to submit. So I will say the value for this, it's going to show up as a button when you say type equals submit. The value, what's the text we want to show? What do I say? Search or something? I'll just, you can decide what's appropriate. And then again, there are styling classes. I'm going to say we need a button, and there's a class called button default. Should have shown up. Okay. Okay, so that's going to be my submission here to go to the so when the user selects from the drop down and goes here, I want to check that the value is coming back to me when the user submits it. So they have to select from the drop down and send it over. So so before I do anything more, what's the next step in the test? How do I know a value is coming over? What's the simplest way? I want to do it step by step. So I added the drop down and then I added a button. What's the next step? I want to know that the conference ID is being received here. So how do I do it? What's the simplest thing I can do? Well, the display adds another element of I like to, but I can do it simply here. Okay, good. Add a breakpoint. Where do I add the breakpoint? You want to get into somewhere over here, so we have this one state. I don't know if you can put a breakpoint. You can put a breakpoint right at the point of entering the body. So I'll just put it here. And I'll run this. By the way, if you want to show that there are these two options here, display conferences, so find conference, display all conferences, and display conferences in drop-down list. If you want to make it easier to navigate without having to type in the entire URL, what do you do? Do you remember it from, what's that?
Set a start page.
You could set it, well, we set that start page, but the start page is going here. So we have another one here. How do we do that? Do you remember? I think we did it in the Fibonacci. Go to the shared folder under views, and then you can go to layout, _layout, and you can see it says action link, home, index, and so on. So, well, we are not using any of these. But so let's say we'll just overwrite about and contact, or if you don't want to do that, you can add these two in. Okay, so I'll just put this in here. I'll copy it and paste it. The action link wants a link for the text. So what is the link for this text? What shall we call this? Search by conference. Okay, whatever. And then, so that's the link. Whatever shows up. What's the second parameter value? It's the same thing, right? Action name and controller name. So what's the action name? What did we call our action? This is what we want. When the user clicks on this, it should take us to this. What's the action it is to? Display conferences in drop-down list. Okay, so that's the name of the method or action. And finally, we want the name of the class itself, which is conference simple. Okay. So at this point, if I went ahead and ran this, but I want to run it in debug mode because, as TJ pointed out, we want it to come and stop here for us to check the conference ID. So we'll run it in debug mode. So there's, okay, start debugging. Okay, so it's going to get all there was a breakpoint here. Okay, so it's going into the model to get this. So why did it go here first? Our breakpoint is, we set it here, but there were previous breakpoints set even earlier, which I obviously didn't notice, which is inside of the model. And the model, why does it go there first? Why did it go into the model and stop there first? What is the first method that gets called? It's display all conferences, right? And display all conferences calls this get all conferences. So, which means that's why if you have breakpoints, when testing, if you have breakpoints after you've tested, remove them so that they don't go to that after when you don't need it. Okay, so now you have this option to search by conference. So if you click that, I choose Big 12, submit search, and it should come and stop. And I have a conference ID value. So it's working for me. I don't know if it's working for you or not. You have to test it. Is it working? You don't know?
It might be in the scope, like the instrument.
Does anyone else? How about?
I'm still looking.
It's loading? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so connection. Well, if you're getting an error now, which application are we in now? Are we in the test application? We are in the web application, so if it's saying SQL Server, some connection error or whatever, then you have to go into web config and check if it is connecting there. Okay, so how many of you are here where you're getting the conference ID sent?
I'm still looking.
It's loading? Yeah. TJ, you're there? Okay, Logan, you said you got it, is it?
No.
Okay. So if you're not getting it, what's the most likely reason for it? If you don't get a conference ID value here. Let's see, TJ, you can try to reason through this.
You're not getting the ID?
Yeah. How do you think this controller recognizes what's the parameter value, where to get the value from?
I guess by speaking with the database.
Not quite to the database, because this is speaking, the only one that this speaks to is what? Where is it getting the data from? The view. Okay, so the view, and so where is my view? Okay, so this view is sending the data to this method, whatever the user provided. And the way remember we call this drop-down list by some name. Right? So this is the name for the drop-down list. So whatever value is being sent from this selected and sent, the way it connects to the method is then this is considered as the variable name. So it has to exactly conform to this. So if you had a case difference or a name difference, it's no longer going to know this is the value. So that's the first place you would look for. And the second, so once you have confirmed that you're getting the drop down, you at least know that the names are there. You don't see the ID values. So if you still are having problems, you have to come back here and check that this all conferences is having both the ID and the conference names. Okay, so yeah.
So I'm getting the conference ID, but that's fine. But when I try to search, if it's not in the it comes up with an error that says the view colleges and selected conference or its master was not found.
Yeah. So what's it telling you? You have not yet created this view. Right. So we need to go ahead and add a view.
You have an error too.
Well, I just stopped it there, and then the thing is, when I'm debugging, I can stop it whenever I want to. So I just stopped it, and so colleges and selected conference, I'm going to create it as an empty view. Okay. Okay. So, but before this, there is one other thing I have to do, and what's that? Do I have the data to send to the view? I don't have it, right? So where is that data coming from? No, I don't want to go to the database. Well, we set everything up, right, with the method that we tested. So we don't want to, this method goes to the database. We don't want to do it all over again. So that's the essence of object orientation, right? We want to call this method, find all colleges currently in conference. So go to the controller. The first thing you want to do is get the list off. What is this? It's for a college conference. So I want to find colleges currently in conference, and it needs a parameter. So what's the parameter? It's this uppercase C conference ID. Right. Okay. So this is getting back a list of college conference objects. So say college conference, and I can say whichever selected colleges or colleges in selected conference. Okay, so we have this list. We are going to generate a view with a name, and this name is different from this method name. That's why we are specifying the view. But if you are not sending this data over in a view bag, and the view bag is really used for single variable values to be sent over, or for the drop-down list, but how do we send this data over to the view? How did we do it in the first method? We sent it over.
As a parameter?
Yeah, as a parameter in the view. So when what we are saying is we are basically creating a view object with this parameter. Okay. So we could have created it as a separate. We could declare a view object, save it there, and then return that view. But this does it all in one statement. So in this case, we are saying we are going to return a view which is this differently named view, and then we are also going to send the data, what they call the object model here, is the data here, so that we are sending over to the view to do its work. Okay. Yes?
Could you say how you created the view before for the new one you just created?
The one that I created, you can highlight, it will try to create it by the name of the whatever method. You highlight it and then add view. So if you do that, it will try to create it with that name. I just changed the name from find to I just removed the find. Okay. So are you here? Okay. So once you have this, the data is basically saying you're sending it to the view, the new view, which is colleges and selected conference. So once you are here, this is going to be very similar to what we did with the previous one. So I'm just going to see if I can, well, maybe I should, we have about 15, 17 minutes. Okay, I'll just go over it. We are again creating a table. So if you want to use some styling, if you want, this is just for giving an extra format. You can obviously go with a simple, just the table tag alone. And in the exam, you don't necessarily have to do any formatting other than display it in the table. So let's say I want to display, what are the things I want? At the very top, it could either, I think I can put it as table header, element monthly, okay, so I'll just put this. Okay, and then inside of it, I'll have a row, and this will consist of the header row with each cell inside it. Okay, and the columns I want to display are, well, I could just go with college name and the date. College name. I called it date begin, but I guess date started would probably be better. But anyways, yes. Okay, date entered. Okay, these are the two I want to display, and then what does this represents? Okay, body of the parent. Okay, So header, table body, and I'm going to have a set of rows. But these rows, I have to do it a little differently. So the way I do it is, I need to, this is the body, and these rows depend upon how much data there is. So I have to look inside of, so I have to write my C# @ symbol. So for each, I need to look at for each item inside of what? So I have to add something at the very top. And what's that? Something I have to add at the very top. We did it in one other place. Yes. The model. So we have to bring in this, like just as we did in display all conferences, we have to bring in the model. So we'll do this similarly at model. And what's the model in this case? What's being sent over from the method and the controller? Which model are we sending? College conference. So it is their last name dot models dot college conference. Okay. Now, if I leave it as is, it's not going to display if I have multiple colleges. What do I need to add? Yeah. Yeah, you have to add this IEnumerable. Anytime you have multiple objects that you need to display, you have to add it in, and then the angle brackets. Okay, so now you look inside for each of these objects, and when you're inside of a view, well, you're going to look inside of this model, okay, and it has this very strange notation or requirement, so keep this in mind. Obviously, you can bring your notes when you're doing the exam, since it's entirely open, whatever resources. This model here is lowercase a after the at, but this model is uppercase without the at symbol, okay, because you already have the at symbol for this. Okay, so we are looking for each item, okay, and you cannot say this is college conference. It's not going to recognize it. So instead, you just use the generic variable, and so you don't specify a data type over here. But for my own purposes, I will say this represents each what? What's it representing? This model consists of all the college conference objects that have been sent over. So each row is each college conference. Okay. So I'm going to take each of these objects and then display it in each of the table rows. So I'm going to put a for each loop for each of the rows, each of the tags here. Okay. And the way I'm going to do it is, again, I have to use TD for each cell. The first cell refers to the college name. So how do I get the college name? Like right now, I have the list of all the college conferences, right? So, yeah, Megan? Okay, so let's see. Yeah, once you have each college conference, now we want the college name, not the conference name. How do I get that? Yeah?
.college.
Okay, we have to navigate over .college name. Okay, and there was an important thing that we needed to do to get this college name. Otherwise, we wouldn't. What was that important thing we needed to do? You know, for some time way back. Yeah. Well, we didn't do it today. We did it last class.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
the SQL, C-sharp SQL thing.
Okay, let's go to that college conference. We did this. This is the C# SQL, as we called it, and what in this brings the college name. Without that, you won't get the college name. Does anyone other than Megan know? It's very simple. Yeah, TJ?
The include part.
Yeah, the include part. If you don't include it, it won't bring in anything that's inside college, because college name is inside the college table or the college class. Okay, so that's how you get the college name, and the second cell gives the each dot date begin. Okay, I'll save this, build it, and run it. So, by the way, if you're only making changes in the view, you can refresh and it will actually get this. So let me just see if it refreshes. Okay. Still building. Okay, so once you run it, how many of you have, it's okay, finished rebuilding, I'll just run it. Okay, so if I don't think there are any teams in the Big East, the Big 12, that's West Virginia, ACC, then Big East. So if you want to add something in, let's see how can we, if there is no, what should we do if there is no let's see if we can just add it in here. If, I guess body, if, what are we trying to do? If model dot count is 0, where is it now? There is model dot count. Okay, count is a method. Okay, if this is 0, which means we want to display. I'll just say TR. I guess we are inside a table. I don't know if we can display without showing the table. TR, TV, and text, or just text. We could probably do it in text. But basically I want to say no colleges in this conference. Else. So this is going to encapsulate all of this here. Okay, so let's see if this works. I'll save it, and sometimes I can just refresh the view, so let's see if that works. Search by conference. Search. Okay. Once inside code, you do not need to hit. So what's that thing? Okay, so it's basically saying unexpected for each. Okay, so it's saying I don't need this. Okay, so what it is saying is if you have an @ symbol, you don't need a second @ symbol. If it recognized it, I don't know why it should say it's an error. It should, the MVC. So do you understand what it is saying? Because I added the @if outside and then the @for each is inside. It's basically saying don't use that twice. But why did it force me to use it for this? Yeah? Well, you can see the color coding. It's recognizing this as a C# keyword, but this is not a keyword, right? It's a variable. So if I remove this, what do you think Razor, which is the C# engine for the view, what will it think of it if I take this out? Yeah.
That'll just display like those words.
Yeah, it's going to display as this, the text without looking at it as a variable. And the last thing you might want to do is figure out how to display the conference name. So instead of saying colleges in selected conference, colleges in whatever conference is selected, how will you get that? The simplest way would be if you might have to set up something like a view by to send it over, or you might need to capture it. You might need to get it from either a database or some other means, but it's currently we don't have the conference name to send over. Okay, so I'll stop here. Any questions? How many of you reached this point? You're not getting this?
I still have an error. Well, I'm still not getting the ID.
You're not getting the ID? Okay.
And then I missed part of what you did, so I was trying to figure it out. I just need to watch the video.
Okay. So for the ID, the main things that you need to see is, have you called the view by this? I'm using the uppercase. So you need to keep it exactly the same in 3 places. One is here. The second is over here, parameter for the method. And the third place is in the view over here. So for the drop-down, this is the name of the drop-down object. So all 3 should be exactly the same. So that's the first place I would look for. Other than that, I don't know where else you might have an area.
I use my debugger.
Yeah.
Like I thought I did everything you did.
Yeah.
And it's not displaying when I'm going to submit. It's not showing me.
So it's getting the conference ID in here.
It's going into the list. And
So
doing all that.
So it has this list here.
Yeah, and then
So-
it screws up with the return of view.
Okay, so are you going to, you have the name exactly the same as this? So if you just right-click and add view, the name it will give is a different name. Find, it's the name of the method. I deliberately left out the find, so just make sure it's...
Oh, mine, I didn't read out mine, that's all.
Okay, so that has to correspond. Okay, who else has it working? Okay, 1, 2, 3. TJ, is yours working?
I'm letting the ID
Okay.
change. Something
Okay.
else.
Okay. So Megan, yours is working?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Your view is not working?
No, it wouldn't work with my laptop, and it never has.
Okay.
I figured it was my laptop, and no. Not working here either.
Well, I know I put it on for
saying display all conferences, error resource cannot be found. Okay, so yeah, so display all conferences. Do you have display all conferences? Okay, this is in the right place. Conferences, display all conferences. Okay, is your project starting at that point? Well, the property. You have no, they want that CSS statement. Did not save it. Okay, your application is working, and you don't have questions, you can begin. Eric, is it working?
Yeah, it's trying to shut everything down.
Log in. You don't even log in. If your computer is not reliable, you should use the lab machine. The exam, you should use the lab. Network location, do you have an internet connection? Yeah, I don't think it's if it's not reliable, then use the lab machine, bring the thumb drive.
What happened over time?
You haven't working this?
Well, she got past her home. Not to the new area.
Not be found, find colleges, selecting one of them, so it means just check what you are calling the method and the name of the view. Okay, so it's called colleges, and so if you go to your method, it's control the method. Probably. You have to just check if it's going to the same location.
Her whole problem was she made her messages.
Yeah, that's usually. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. just when you come on Tuesday, just make sure you have your whatever notes you need. I'm going to have you sit with leaving one space between each of you. So come a little earlier, like 10 minutes early, so that you Tuesday.
Oh wait, I have it in We're allowed to like have like the project that we've been working on, right?
Yeah, you can reference anything.
It's fine. I got the one problem, right? I'll work on it afterwards.
So I'm just like, obviously you guys do this, right? If it's like, I keep them